And I just wanted to say a warm welcome. I am thrilled that we are together again in community. I feel like we can't do this work alone. And there's something that is really, really important about the solidarity of knowing that we're not the only ones that are going through what we're going through. And so much of what I learned is actually from your own shares and your perspectives. So I really appreciate the courage that it takes to come out and say what's going on for you. And just know that any suggestions that I offer, whether it's for, journal activities or share outs, are all voluntary. So please listen to yourself. If something doesn't feel comfortable, honor that. And it's totally okay to say I pass. So I really like starting these sessions with getting a sense of you and why it is that you chose to take this particular series. It helps inform what I want to focus on. And also it just feels really good to get a sense of what are the intentions that folks have and what are you wanting? So is anyone willing to start us off? What is it about reestablishing self-connection and self-trust that brought you here? And unfortunately, the way we are brought up in the society is really to favor cognition, which is great to a certain degree, but we really are operating at a limited capacity if we're not engaging also with the communication that the body offers and what the heart offers. And when we do have all of those online, we have more capacity. And I think a big part of feeling lack of trust in ourselves comes from feeling unsafe, that we're not capable of navigating uncertainty. And part of that is true because until we have our full capacity on board, it's going to be hard to get clarity to make the right decision for the right action. So I love that you're wanting to re-engage with those aspects that maybe have not been exercised as much and really validate them and bring them forward and have them to balance out the cognition so that you can have the clarity that you need. So thanks for that. It really resonated, the part where you said that sometimes there's a tendency to prioritize other people's needs at the cost of our own. Does anyone else do that? Kind of resonate. I think, yeah, we all kind of have that tendency. And we are going to talk a little bit about that in one of the sessions. And I guess the inquiry is, how do we bring balance, right? In where we are connected to ourselves and we're available for the other person, but it doesn't come at a cost. And hey, Roberta, that's definitely, I think, an inquiry. It's an ongoing inquiry, and it's really a feeling into that. And thankfully, we have our body, and our body gives a biofeedback, so that when we go a little bit past threshold, what happens, for me at least, what happens is resentment, and I go into blame, and I get judgmental. And I know when I start getting blamey and judgmental, I've gone over threshold. It's not really about the other person. It's I abandoned myself at some point, and I'm redirecting that to something else. So I think that that is an area for growth for everyone. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah. Thank you for that share. I saw so many nods, and I felt totally with you when you were describing how, yeah, it's hard to be connected to ourselves or even know ourselves when we're giving ourselves over completely to serving others. And the inquiry that comes up for me, and this is my own inquiry that I've been having for a while, is it serving others if it comes at a cost from me? Is it authentic service? Or is there an ulterior motive to it, which is to be liked or to feel like I'm reciprocating something? Or is it because I don't trust them to accept a no from me, whatever that be, right? Like what's actually really going on here? Because the biofeedback doesn't feel good, does it? It's just like there's fatigue, there's kind of a resignment, it doesn't feel good. So the body is telling me that something is off, and yet I can't stop doing it. So what's going on, and how do I uncouple myself from this? And yeah, I love what you put in the chat is like, yeah, sometimes it's just easier to do what the other person wants to avoid all the drama that's going to come, the punishment, right? That's going to come after that if I don't do it. So there's a lot of different reasons for why we do things. And my hope is that through this class, we can shift to really start prioritizing ourselves so that we can genuinely be there for others, but most importantly, be there for ourselves. Any other comments? I really appreciate that perspective. Yeah, it seems like they are different values, right? The individualism, like really favored in this culture, and at the same time, there really is so much towards the collective, volunteering, charity. There's some beautiful aspects to that. And with regards to your comment of like, well, what about people that have given selflessly? Do they just have more energy and more availability than all the rest of us to be able to give like that? Is it authentic giving, or is it self-sacrifice that they're going through? And I can only speak from my experience, but what I have noticed over the years is that my capacity to be able to hold space and to be of authentic service for people has increased significantly. And I think that this capacity is because I have spent a significant amount of years really in self-connection. That my ability to meet my own needs satiates me in such a deep way that I actually don't get that from the external world. One, because everybody is contending with their own needs. And I am going to talk a little bit about this in a few minutes. But the second is that there is just this idea that we have that our needs actually need to be fulfilled by other people or by external circumstances. And I do think that that's something that we carry with us, because when we came into the world, we were vulnerable and we were incapable of meeting a lot of our needs, right? As a baby, we are dependent on our caretakers. And as adults, we develop skills, but I think that conditioning of still expecting others to fulfill our needs or certain circumstances to fulfill our needs hasn't left us. And what that has done is it has put us in a state of disempowerment, because we're waiting for people to behave in a particular way for us to feel like we matter or that we're seen and heard, instead of us having that validation come internally and not needing it from others. If I don't need it from others, and if I'm not spending all my waking moments in strategizing in how to get those needs met because I'm already needing them, that energy is available actually to serve. So this is kind of circling around back, Yusuf, to what you were saying, is just like, do some people have more capacity? It's like, we can develop more capacity. And a big part of that is shifting the view, right? Kind of going back to our previous class. If our view or our reality is that all of our fundamental needs are coming from others, then that's a really problematic view. That means that we're going to be constantly reaching out, putting pressure on others, which makes them less likely to fulfill our needs. Or we're blaming others for not meeting our needs, for mattering or being understood or whatever, which guarantees we're not going to get those needs met, because nobody wants to be punished for something that they're not responsible for in the first place. And so we're in this perpetual kind of needy state. And that is very disconnecting in relationship because nobody wants to be around somebody that's needy. And it's very disconnecting for us too, because we feel disempowered and we feel helpless and we are victims. And when we're in the victim state and when we are in blame, we're unable to get out of that. The attention is in the wrong place. So having the right view, which I want to kind of preface this class, is that we have the capacity to meet a lot of our needs. And not only do we have the capacity, we have the responsibility. It's not somebody else's responsibility. And that shift is what allows for empowerment. And attending to those needs ourselves is what starts to generate self-trust. We start to trust ourselves because we can rely on ourselves to take care of ourselves. We develop a relationship of attunement, of getting to know ourselves, of deep listening, attending to. And that relationship is, we're becoming allies. We're becoming allies with our body. We're becoming allies with our emotions because we see that they're not a problem. They're actually information. They're information to us to know what is it that is not being met so that I can bring my attention there and I can go into right action in meeting those needs. The inner critic, how can we befriend the inner critic? How can we treat ourselves with more gentleness, care, compassion? And what's the impact of that? Right? It's a completely different reality that we get to experience. And so we're definitely going to talk about that. I think that it's going to start to naturally arise. That's my hope, is to get beyond the technique, but really get to a deep experience that leads the self-compassion to come up naturally. And so I'm going to share my experience. This is a perfect kickoff, and I'm probably going to get emotional. So I'm apologizing already ahead of time, because every time I look at this picture, I cry. But I'm going to share my screen here so you can see what I'm talking about. So I wanted to start off with just why this work of developing a new kind of relationship to ourselves is so important. And this was my inspiration. This is who I was when I was 1. And every time I look at this picture, I get emotional because I see this part of me who still is the same as the photo, which is incredibly vulnerable, innocent, confused, open, alive, curious, and that is sovereign to a certain degree. She did whatever she wanted to do. She didn't hesitate. She didn't worry so much about impact. She was in her fullness. And there's a yearning that I have to be able to experience those aspects of her. And yet what remains inside of me are the aspects of the vulnerability, the feeling of unsafety, the wanting to matter, the wanting to be seen and heard, to be understood, to be safe, to feel cared for. That part has never left. And of course, she came into the world sovereign, and through parenting, no matter what kind of parenting we do, it's impossible to meet another individual's full needs. My parents had needs of their own that they were contending with. And as she went into school and as she came into contact with other beings, everybody trying to meet their own needs in whatever way possible, she changed. She started to question how to do things. She developed defensive mechanisms. She came up with coping strategies to keep herself safe. And at the time, those strategies might have worked. And these are strategies that I still have. And so I became very intrigued with this little one. And something deep inside me hit that what would happen if I were to reparent her? What would happen if I were to attend to all of her needs that are still alive inside of me? What would happen if I were to listen when she was upset or she was scared and encourage her instead of telling her to work harder or to stuff it? Big girls don't cry. What if I were to offer her the attention and the interest that she's yearning for? What if I were to love her authentically without there being any strings attached? Accept her just as she is. Allow for her full expression. Allow for even the parts I don't like about her. What if I were to relate to her in the way I've always wanted to be related to? And I came to realize that it's been about 4 decades and we tried a different way, and it didn't yield any results that I was very happy with. So maybe I should try this experiment. And for the last 4 years, I have been very committed to attending to this little one. Everything I do, I check in with her if I can remember to do so. And when I forget, I come back and I apologize and I try again. And what has developed is just this beautiful relationship. And it's not an easy relationship because I forget sometimes and I go back into my old conditioned self, which is, I would say, even abusive to a certain degree, harsh, forceful. And I notice the impact that that has on her, and I have to backtrack, and I get to do it over again. And the availability of me being here has changed significantly because my energy is not tied up so much anymore in defensive strategies. For the first time, because of this inner communication, I actually know what is happening and what it is that she needs. And I can often attend to those needs. And by attending to those needs lovingly, she's began to trust me, and I'm getting more and more information from her. And we've become allies. It's not so much a contentious relationship where I don't like these aspects of myself and I need to fix them. It's a loving relationship of like, oh, what wants attention? Okay, so right now you're feeling judgmental. Right now you are throwing a tantrum. I don't particularly like it, but that means that there's something else that's going on. And I want to know what that is. And I want to let you know that I am here until I find out what that is. And we are going to take care of that together. Going back to the question of, how can we authentically serve? When my needs are met, when my cup is full, I am available. I'm available not just to serve, but to see. I don't have energy or distractions that are diverted by paying attention to strategies that don't work, like blame or defensiveness. I'm available. And so my problems get resolved much faster, and I have surplus energy. And with that surplus energy, I can serve. So why choose you? Why choose to prioritize yourself? because you are the most important being in your life. Even if you have children, even if you have other responsibilities, you cannot be authentically available for them in a wholesome way, in a skillful way, if you do not have your fundamental needs filled. Otherwise, it will be tied with resentment. And that's not sustainable. Why should you choose you? Because it is your responsibility to listen to your heart's yearning and to serve them and to offer yourself the life that you want to have. So no matter how independent we happen to think we are, or how much free will we think we have, actually, if we were to look at every single behavior that we engage in, every one of them is coming from trying to meet a fundamental need. And I'm not going to go into the detail of what all those needs are. And of course, there's a hierarchy of them, right? At the very foundational level, we have physiological needs for survivorship. You need rest, you need food, you need water. And of course, on an emotional level, we need to feel safe. And then on top of that, of course, we have emotional needs as well. We need to be seen, known, heard, acknowledged. We need to feel like we belong. We need friendship, companionship, love. And when those needs are fulfilled, we actually have the availability to meet our need for self-actualization. And that's the one I'm the most interested in. The question that came up for me as I was spending time with that little girl is, what would happen if I reparented her, and instead of punishing or shaming her for anything that was difficult or even for misbehavior, I met it with empathy and I offered encouragement and I let her know that I'm on her side and I nourished any interest that she had? What would she be capable of doing? Who would she become? It made me realize that when I get to the end of my life, I'm going to feel really bummed out if I don't get to find out the answer to that question. I want to know what it's like to be my full potential, what it's like to self-actualize. And so I kind of mentioned this already in the introduction, is that one of the issues that gets in the way of us actually meeting our needs is this conditioning that we have to think that it can only be fulfilled externally. When we are in that place, it's an incredible disempowering place because we can't control people. We try to get them to do what we want them to do to meet our needs. We can't control external circumstances. We try to as well and spend a tremendous amount of energy doing that, and it doesn't work. What if instead we were to take responsibility for meeting our needs and do the best that we could to actually offer that to ourselves? What if we were to develop an intimate relationship to self and really get to know that the emotions that are coming out are actually an indication of needs that were not met? That while unpleasant, some of them, they're actually really important information. So instead of pushing them away or avoiding them, I'm actually meeting them to understand what is the message that is being generated by my own organism so that I can be fulfilled. This is what supports our actualization, is the ability to have the empowerment to get what it is that we need. And so what's the result? Well, the result is that when we start attending to our needs, when we start developing this relationship with self and listening and getting to know ourselves and attune and moment to moment meet what it is that we need, we start making decisions that are more in alignment with what we want. And the biofeedback that we get from that is joy. And the way we start seeing this translate into our lives is that our lives start to align more and more with what was considered a distant dream. We start actually creating, manifesting what it is that we've always wanted. And so the last reframe I want to give before we go into an activity is this idea of self-actualization, right? What do I mean by self-actualization is really coming into our fullness and using that fullness to bring forward something that brings incredible meaning to ourselves. Whether that be something, we all have different flavors of this, what it is that we yearn to bring, whether it's music, whether it's poetry, whether it's service to another, whether it's being a really good teacher, a really good librarian, or whatever your flavor is. That it's not an endpoint, actually. Oftentimes we think about this as like, oh, I need to self-improve because if I do these things, then I'm going to become better and I'm going to be self-actualized. And I want to change that view and say that we actually, it's a state. It's a state that is available to us now. It's not something we need to become. It's a possibility that's already here. And I want to frame this as we kind of oscillate in and out along this spectrum. That I'll say that on the far side over here, we can experience the state of deep conditioning. And what I mean by conditioning is that we're not present. There is something else that is dictating our actions that is not voluntary. So you can think about like a deep triggered state where you don't know what's happening until after it happened. But all this action, you've engaged in all this action, and then you're aware of it, that's conditioning. It's like a programmed response that has come through past experiences or just your fight, flight, freeze mechanism kicking in and taking over your organism. As we move more into consciousness, you get presence. But I want to throw in self-actualization on this spectrum as well, because presence is, yes, I am in connection with my sensory and I am available and I am sensing what's going on and I am conscious and actions and decisions are voluntary. Self-actualization is actually going into that action and being manifested when we're in the fullness. And where most of us spend our time is mostly kind of oscillating between the conditioned and present state, right? And what our life feels like is that we're just surviving it. And we have these moments of grace where we're present. And what I'm proposing is that it is actually possible to raise the bar from surviving to thriving, where we are residing more in presence and in the self-actualized state. And that self-actualization is not a point to get to. It's something that we already experience, maybe not as frequently or not for as long, but what we can do is we can start increasing the frequency in which that state arises and also the length or the duration in which we are in that state. So I'm going to pause there because that was a lot. And I'm just kind of curious how that's landing or if you have any questions. Going anywhere. We're just coming in and out of states. And we do have choice around which states we want to experience more. That is the objective of the course, is to try to line us up into being able to have more of those experiences. But the short of the answer is really invest in your self-connection, because your body will inform you how to get there. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to jump into an activity where you can reflect over a moment in your life where you actually experience that state of self-actualization. Okay. And so I'll share mine very briefly. Some of you already know this because I've worked with some of you. And what I mean by self-actualization, I mean a moment in your life where you felt like you really were in your fullness. You showed up at your full capacity. And that could be a moment at work. That could be an interpersonal moment with another person that you actually surprised yourself, like how you were able to show up for that person. It could be a challenge that you overcame that you had no idea how you were going to do it. And somehow something else kicked in and you really came through beyond what you could have imagined. And so the point of this activity is really for you to feel the state more than the activity itself. So what I'm going to ask is, while you're going through these prompts, notice how you're feeling as you're going through the exercise more than trying to do the exercise right. Okay. So the example that I have, and I'll try to keep this brief, is at my school. I'm a high school teacher. I was a high school teacher. I was really concerned that with climate change, and that within the high school curriculum, it was only taught for 2 weeks at most. If you were a freshman and if you came in my class, you'd get 5 weeks of it. But I really didn't feel like that was enough exposure for the monumental problem that we're in, and felt that there should be more exposure for students, and all students should have equal access to this information. And I went to my assistant principal and I said, look, I want us to stop the school and I want us to do an assembly on climate change. You know, it's like we have, I don't know how many rallies a year where we're able to stop the school and get everyone together to build school culture. I want this also to be part of the school culture. And I was really surprised when she came back to me and she said, how about instead of an hour, since it's a school-wide event, we give you like 5 hours, you get a half day. And I was completely overwhelmed. Like, what am I going to do for 5 hours? And I'm going to do this by myself. And I didn't end up doing it by myself. I partnered with 3 key people, and together we put on an event where we got all of the students into the auditorium. I involved a bunch of key partners within the community and had them come in and host workshops. We had teachers within the school share workshops with students. We had students that led workshops. I mean, it was something that was beyond anything I thought I was capable of making happen. And this picture captures me on stage when I was looking out, and I just had this moment of realization of, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And how did I get up here? And this is a wild, wild surprise. It's not something that I would have imagined. And after the event and all the stress wore out, what I was left with was this incredible sense of correctness, that whatever motivated me to do that, and the fact that I was actually able to bring into fruition something that I was dissatisfied about, and I took it upon myself to try to solve the problem, and I was capable of doing it. And it was a massive event, and it didn't come out perfect, but it was a beginning. What it also pointed towards was my capacity. My capacity exceeded my perception of what I could do. And that event marked me in a way of, one, really showing me that it's worthwhile to follow the impulse of the heart, what is needed. And that when I do that, it's not just about me meeting my needs for safety and for, awareness of climate change and all of that, but also it served the collective. There was something about attending to what was alive in my heart that was of benefit to me, but also to others. And as well as it gave me confidence about my abilities, and that is safety. Safety is not about managing uncertainty. Safety is about being given any circumstance and being able to sit within our capacity and know that we have the capacity to deal with whatever is happening. And after that event, it's changed my sense of safety. It's also changed my perception of what else can I do now? If I could do this, what else? So I'll stop there because I really want this to be more about your journey. This was kind of a big example. You don't have to pick a big example. It could be something, as I said, that it could just be a moment where you were your full actualized self. When I think of self-actualization, it is a state as a result of action. And it's action that's in alignment with what our core values are and what the heart's desire is. And so that's why I'm kind of tying it to an experience or an event. But it could be a simple experience like having a partner come home and be really upset and blame me and attack me. And in that moment, noticing the impulse to defend and maybe do something back, to retribute back, and having a moment where I can actually see beyond that their frustration and what is going on with them and be curious about their need and resist the impulse to go into conditioning and to actually engage lovingly with that person. And in that moment, the alchemy of that shift in attitude does something for the other person. And that person perceives the safety in that, and everything drops. And what we have is this incredible moment of connection, even though the circumstances were for severe disconnection. So it can be any small thing. Maybe I'm afraid of trying something and there's some aspect of me that's really yearning for it. And I decide to take a risk. And I'm surprised afterwards by having taken that risk and what has come from it. I appreciate you bringing that up, Yusuf, because, I don't want to pose it that it's like grandiose ideas. Like I quit my job and I stood up for myself, or it doesn't have to be a large life transition. It could just be a moment where I was rushing to go to work and I smelled the flowers, and all of a sudden I looked at the sky and I was just caught with this exquisite beauty that was there. And I was surprised with my capacity to perceive. And when I gave myself over to that experience, there was a deep sense of connection that I've never experienced before with my surroundings, right? So it's anything that feels like it stands out to you as it's not just presence, there's something more about it. There's almost a sense of sacredness to it. Does that help? Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions? Okay, so here are the prompts. I would suggest before you start writing that you actually close your eyes and think about something and see if you can pull it back into feeling it. And then when you're ready and you've noticed how your body feels and what emotions come up, see if you can put that on the paper. And you don't have to answer my questions. These are just prompts or suggestions to help you get to that place. And if you don't feel the state, please don't be disappointed, okay? It's just, we're trying different experiments here. And I'm going to leave this up on the screen, and you're welcome to turn your cameras off if you'd like, so you can have privacy. And I'm going to give us about 7 minutes for this before I check in to see if you need more time. I'm hoping that there was enough time for folks. Okay, great. So I'm really curious, in particular, the last questions where it was kind of a focus on like, what did you feel like going through that experience? Were you able to taste or reminisce what it was like to touch a state? I'm not going to call it self-actualization because that seems too grandiose, right? But just like, let's say, of being in your fullness. And I'm really curious what the impact was on you of having that experience, and also on the other, if there was another that was involved. Appreciate you bringing up that it wasn't necessarily a pleasant state, because oftentimes we associate, being in a state of fullness of being something that's pleasurable or joyful. And sometimes it's really not. I'm curious, however, after you went through that experience, was there a sense of relief, or was there a sense of connection to self for having stood in your values and advocated for what you wanted? And the biofeedback, when we are in alignment, it is that feeling of correctness, right? Even though it might be unpleasant what we go through, there is just this sense of this is correct. And in that comes a certain satiation and satisfaction because we are in alignment. And it does serve, even if it's difficult. And the biofeedback is that of relief, like, oh, okay, yes, that was needed. Very unpleasant, but it's attended to. Yeah. Thanks so much for that share. Risking following what is correct is scary because oftentimes that's going to displease somebody else. Choosing ourselves and not agreeing to go along with what somebody else wants us to do is very anxiety producing because most likely it's going to generate conflict. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage to actually risk dealing with the consequences of standing by what it is that's right for us. And so I really appreciate these shares where we're able to recognize that it's not necessarily an easy process in the short term, but if we were to look at it in the span of the long term, it actually facilitated our life a lot, right? Things could have been a lot, the suffering could have been extended for longer periods of time. I could have lost a lot of energy, a lot of resources. It could have generated even more harm. So that sense of correctness is a nice metric. And we all have that within us, which is great, right? Of what it's like to be in alignment. Any other comments? The sense of confidence is something that is so nourishing and so rare in my life that when I'm in that state, I know I've surpassed, like I'm really far in the spectrum. We're talking about conditioning, presence, and self-actualization. Let's say that, even within self-actualization, there's different levels of that, right? It's hard to like categorize where we are, but we're going on that spectrum and we're aiming to get closer to the end of it. And I'm just calling it self-actualization, but we could say being in your fullness, you have all of your faculties online. There is a precision, there's an intentionality, and the delivery is concise. It's perfect. And there's just this sense of complete alignment with all aspects of our being. It's the physical is in there, the emotional is in there, the mental is in there. All of it is working together to produce this state of correctness. And that is one thing we can experience. However, if it's mixed in with conflict, if it's mixed in with difficulty, if it's in an unsafe setting, our experience of that will be different, right? There will be anxiety. There will be hesitation. There will be doubt, maybe. But there's something inside that's still kind of pushing us forward, right? And we're just like, no, I'm still going to do this. I don't care if it hurts. I don't care if it's painful. There's a level of determination in there. So I'm going to circle back to kind of Perlita's inquiry, which is like, okay, how do we have more of this? Great. Like this is a possible state. So how do we cultivate this state? And the hypothesis that I'm going to test out with you guys, or my guinea pigs, is that I think that we cultivate this by cultivating self-connection. And what I mean by self-connection is, I mean our ability to attune to what's actually going on inside of ourselves. On a very simplistic level, being aware of how we feel somatically, physically, like what's the body doing in this moment? What emotions are coming up? What kind of thoughts are going on in this moment? And what's the state And for those of you that are writing, just know I'll share all of these notes with you afterwards. And being able to attune moment to moment to what's going on internally with the organism. In other words, being mindful is what allows us moment to moment to know how to respond appropriately. And so on a very foundational level, self-connection is just knowing what's going on. And by attuning to ourselves, we start to get indications about what are the underlying needs that are being met. So we're recognizing, oh, these emotions go along with this need being met. Oh, these emotions that are very unpleasant, I don't like, and I try to avoid, get rid of them, are actually giving me really valuable information about a boundary transgression, my need for respect, my need for time alone, whatever that be. Right? It's not just something that I need to get rid of. It's actually really valuable information. And I want to invite that in, and I want to get to know it, to understand what is the message that the body is sending to me. And a big part of self-connection is actually spending the time to listen to yourself, to validate what you're feeling versus, oh, come on, we're going into this again, or I don't like this aspect of you. You need to go away. You keep interjecting with what I'm doing here. All our parts that kind of pop out, get to know them. Spend time with yourself. Can you give yourself pleasure? Are you allowed to enjoy? What's it like to spend time with yourself and have a good time? But I think that this is the most important one, really, is the attitude. The attitude that we want to have is really of permissiveness. Anything that I am experiencing is allowed. This is the only place I can come home to where anything is allowed. Because if I go out in the world, I'm going to have to follow the expectation and rules for whatever institution I'm in or whatever community I'm participating with. So when I come home to myself, everything is allowed, anything is accepted. And my attitude is of kindness, it's of gentleness, it's of love, support, encouragement, which is a very different attitude than what we generally have with ourselves. My attitude towards myself oftentimes is, I need to fix whatever I don't like about myself and become better. There's a problem with these aspects of myself. That's not okay, right? There's a certain rejection. There's a certain denying. There's a judgment. There's a fragmentation of different aspects of myself that are not accepted versus a embracing and bringing them in and seeing that they are some kind of defensive strategy that developed at some point when I was younger, and that they actually are on my side and they're wanting to protect me. They might be misattuned. They might not really serve today, my more modern self. However, they're still there out of protection. Can I honor that? Can I respect it? Can I validate it? Can I soothe those aspects of myself versus criticizing? And so, we start a relationship with ourselves by evaluating what our current relationship is. I kind of like to think about it like a marriage, although it's kind of funny me saying this because I've never been married. That, like some time goes on and at some point you kind of want to check in, it's like both parties have changed over time and maybe they're still relating to each other like they used to in the past, but it's not really the updated version of themselves. And what we have is more than a marriage. We actually have a whole family internal system of all of these parts of ourselves that are defense strategies, and they haven't really been updated as to what the current status is. And so spending time and inviting these different aspects of ourselves and getting to know it is like rekindling a relationship. And so I'm going to drop these prompts here just for you to check in. What is your relationship to yourself like right now? Are you close? Do you spend time with yourself? Are you supportive when things are hard? When you make mistakes? Do you trust yourself? Do you listen to what it is that you want and advocate for yourself? How come? How would you like to relate to yourself if you're not relating in that way already? And what gets in the way of that happening? And then I like this one. If you had nothing holding you back, meaning no insecurities, doubts, etc., how would you show up? What are the qualities that you actually want to embody, and what's stopping you today? And then finally, on a larger scale, if there were no limiting factors, and we did this one in Finding Your Way, but it's nice to get a more updated version, what kind of life do you want? And not specifics, like I want a house and I want to have vacation and all of this, but like, what's the quality of the life that you're looking to have? For me, it's unstructured time, freedom of choice. Okay. So I'm going to give you about 7 minutes again with this one. And if you want to turn off your cameras, feel free to do so. If you finish early, can you send me a message in the chat? So that way I'm not forcing everyone to stay longer than what they need to. I'm curious if there were any realizations as you went through this process. Anything that stood out to you? Any emotions that might have arisen that surprised you? That all parts are valid, that it doesn't need to be an illness. All parts get to be advocated for and seen and respected and heard and attended to. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Empowering, because that is what leads us to self-responsibility, like authentic self-responsibility. Is that we are actually the ones that determine the quality of life that we have. Or we have a strong influence. Of course, there's other things that we, like have to deal with, which are unforeseen circumstances, family members we didn't choose, etc. But yeah, we do have influence. Any other? I know we're at time, and I am going to send the home practices, and I really encourage you to try the home practices, the suggested practices, in particular around this topic, because, the self-connection is a relationship that deserves your time and your attention. It really does. Like everything else is kind of important, but nothing is more important than this relationship that you're developing with yourself. And for the longest time, what we did was we put everything as a priority. And really what you're going to get out of this course is if you actually put yourself as the priority, because this is what's proving to yourself that you're actually serious about this relationship. And this is what the foundation of trust is, right? It's not just like the intention, but we're following it with action. My encouragement for you is to see this relationship that you're kindling with yourself like a love affair. Like when you have a new lover and you're intrigued by everything about them and you're really curious, and you look at their quirks and it's cute and you kind of want to go through their closet and see everything that's in there. Do that for yourself. Get in there and see what's in the garage. Why do I have these things? Why did I pick these objects? Why did I bring them home? How is this a representation of me? What kind of music do I like to listen to? Go through pictures. Spend time with yourself. Start relating to yourself with interest and curiosity. That attitude is the most important one. Because when you fall in love with yourself, I will tell you, you will have no problem advocating for yourself. You won't. And that relationship is one that has been wanting to happen your whole life. It's the most hungriest need that we have. It's almost like that is our spiritual journey, to lose our way and be pushed into believing that we're supposed to be a particular way, and then reclaim our power back and step into our sovereignty, where we do it our way and we see the rewards of doing it our way, because our life starts to transform and it starts to be more in alignment with what is in accordance to our hearts, and there's more joy and there's more satisfaction. And then all of a sudden we have superpowers, and then we're doing things we never thought we would be doing. And, you know, life is surprising. It can be beautiful. And so start to develop this relationship to self and give it the commitment that you would give a serious partner, because you are worthy of that commitment. And I will tell you that this is the most important partnership you will ever have in your life. This is the one that's going to be with you, that dies with you, holding you. Nobody can know you like you know you. And there's just a hunger for that connection. So that's my encouragement. And be gentle and be kind and be patient. There's a part of you that's probably mad at you. Just like, oh, you've been like self-sacrificing me and you've been criticizing me and now you want to be my friend. You're going to have to try a little bit harder than that. You know, I need action. Prove it to me. So just be really, really, really gentle with the process and accepting and loving of anything that comes up. And the last thing I will say is this work that you do towards yourself is of service to the collective. This is not selfish. This is for the collective. The people that are in your lives right now will benefit from this work that you do with yourself. When you take care of yourself, when you love yourself, when you have solid boundaries, when you advocate for yourself, it makes other people feel safe. It allows them to come out and feel safe to connect with you, because they're not feeling the pressure that they have to be a particular way for you to feel like your needs are being met. And the potential connection that arises from that, and the collaboration that arises from that. And you become the model for what everybody else is wanting and doesn't believe that it's possible. And we need reference points. So just know that anything that you do towards yourself is also going towards the collective. And so I wanted to thank you so much for being here, for choosing you, for being part of this community and making this possible. And I can't wait to hear what you discover along the way. There's the email list, so feel free to reach out to each other if you want, you know, get a buddy to like share out your discoveries, or you can reply to the thread that I send out that has everybody's email about, hey, I discovered this, you know, because, you know, it's like we kind of need each other to encourage, because otherwise I'll totally forget about this until like Sunday night. So